93% chance of recession based on hard data. This is what UBS is saying. I'm going to tell you right now, it's probably not a time to panic. We are not looking at the end of the world. All you have to do is go to Google, type in recession, put any year behind it, and you're going to find a half a dozen articles predicting recession, and most of those didn't occur. I am a little bit more concerned than I have been in the past, largely because it's just been a very, very long time since a credit cycle has been allowed to end without massive government intervention. And we've built up a massive debt bubble at the consumer level. And when job losses finally do occur, it's going to hurt anyone who's lent money to anyone else because people are going to stop paying their bills. And that is just a fact. However, I don't believe this is the end of the world. This is going to be a perfectly normal recession where we see a retraction in the economy for probably 3 to 4 quarters. We see the stock market decline by 20 or 30%. The stock market always starts to recover long before the economy does. That is the one thing you need to remember about the stock market. Usually about the time you pull the plug and get out of the market, you're not far away from needing to be back in the market. This is one of the reasons I don't really time the market very much. I buy stocks, I buy mutual funds, and I don't really think about them again. I simply let things go. So let's talk about what this is based on. UBS announced that after crunching some hard data, they think that there's a 93% chance of the U.S. entering a recession this year. We may already be in a recession, especially when we look at inflation-adjusted numbers, but we don't really know that we are because 2 of the major agencies within the U.S. government cannot be trusted anymore for the data that they produce because the people who were in charge before, who were political appointees but were not specifically serving anyone other than the data, they were fired because they gave the president numbers that he didn't like and they were replaced with lackeys. So UBS's forecast is based on several objective economic indicators like personal income, consumption, industrial production, and unemployment. Let's go over what that means. The unemployment situation. These graphs tell a story that's not very alarming until you get to right here. We've seen a little bit of an increase in unemployment since August of 2023 from about 3.6% up to about 4.3, 4.4% here in August 2025. I would say that that's probably within the realm of just normal fluctuations when we're very close to full employment. We don't get to 0% employment. That's not the way it works. People are always cycling in and out of jobs. There's always going to be some level of unemployment. The big danger sign for me in the economy right now is the amount of people who are first-time job entrants, who are unemployed, who are really struggling to find jobs. And it's largely because of these indicators right here. The market is basically frozen. The job market is frozen. People aren't firing very much, but they also aren't hiring very much. The other thing that bothers me right now is where these jobs are being lost. And a lot of it is in manufacturing, actually. Employment changed little in August, 12,000 jobs, but manufacturing employment is down 70,000 for the year. I don't think that this is necessarily reflective of a failed tariff policy. It's simply the result of the economy grinding to a halt. It's not grinding to a halt because of incredible mismanagement, although that could happen in the future. I think it is likely to happen in the future because I have zero faith in monetary policy or fiscal policy of this administration. I'm sorry, the fiscal policy, not the monetary policy of this administration. But we are seeing that there's been little change in construction, retail, trade, transportation, warehousing, information, financial activities, professional business activities. We're seeing lower manufacturing employment. Some of this is probably factories that are shutting down. You can go out on TikTok or on YouTube and find videos about people talking about factories being shut down. I'm sure that the fiasco with Hyundai in Georgia doesn't help the situation either. All right. The next thing we want to look at is personal income, outlays, and savings. The PCE, personal interest payments, and personal current transfer payments increased by about $1.329 billion in August. That sounds pretty good, right? So personal savings was about 1 trillion. That's kind of low. And the personal savings rate as a percentage of disposable income, not all income after you pay off all the things you have to pay, was about 4.6%. This is a little bit below average, but let's remember Americans are not very good at saving. What we do is mindlessly consume. This is what we do. This is where everything is being eaten up right now in terms of consumer spending increase. About 13% for transportation services, food services and accommodations, recreational goods and vehicles. When I see this amount of income being spent with recreation, goods, and vehicles, this is normally an indication that we have a very healthy economy. The problem with this economy right now is debt, total debt balance. We're seeing a fairly large rise in total debt balance. We never really saw a decline in total debt balances after 2020 because increases in income were being eaten up. Remember when I said that we had about $129 billion in increased personal cash flow? Now we're showing on consumer credit reports that mortgage balances grew by $131 billion in the second quarter of 2025. We're also seeing that HELOCs rose by about $9 billion for the third consecutive quarterly increase, is about $411 billion in HELOC balances, $94 billion above the low reached in the first quarter of 2022. We've been adding on debt ever since then. The big thing to look at right now is credit card balances. These are unsecured loans, of course, rose by $27 billion in the second quarter, now totaling about $1.21 trillion. Student debt is about $1.64 trillion. This number in credit card balances is 5.8% above the level a year ago. Between housing debt and credit card balances, that has wiped out all of the income gains over the last year. That doesn't even include auto loan balances raising by about $13 billion, which now stands right at the level of student debt, $1.66 trillion. And other balances, which includes retail cards and consumer finance loans, were roughly unchanged, but still at about $540 billion. So we are reaching a point where credit can no longer be extended to people because their incomes are not keeping up with their debt load. One of the first signs that the economy is coming apart is going to be when HELOCs are basically locked. They won't allow you to borrow anymore, regardless of what your credit is like or what your income is like. And I think that's coming here in the very near future. That's just one of the signs that banks are starting to take risk off their balance sheets. We're also going to see a lot more people packaging up debt and selling it on the open market to suckers. And they're going to be selling less than stellar quality debt. We don't have the same sort of crazy environment that's going to allow people to package up subprime loans. So watch companies like SoFi and a couple of other these fintechs who are very, very heavily invested in personal loans. They are going to be packaging up their loans and securitizing their loans, trying to get them off of their balance sheets. They're going to be selling those as debt-backed securities. It's going to be good for their bottom line. It's going to reduce their risk, and some other sucker is going to have those loans, and a number of those are going to go bad. Anyway, just kind of pointing out changes that are going on right now. I suggest that you do your own research. I would also suggest that you have an emergency fund in place right now that covers at least 6 months of living expenses to plan for a longer period of unemployment if you're in a risky industry or even if you're not in a risky industry. And I also suggest that you start paying down some of your credit card balances because you're going to need to manage your debts and pay off the most important debts going forward. Anyway, thank you very much and have a nice day.